Let's look at memory formation and parenting. Parenting and memory formation. And as I told you in my last video, this book is so beautiful. The context of holiness. That I have decided to look at some themes presented in this book. So to do some reflection from these themes and from what the author, Mark Foley, is helping us to identify here. On page 56 and page 57 of this book, the author addresses what he called the gathering storm. And remember, it is in view of reflecting on the life of Saint Therese of Lisieux. Saint Therese of Lisieux is the focal point here. So this author identifies what he calls mirroring in psychology. You know what a mirror is. When you stand in front of the mirror, what do you see? What do you look at? And how does that impact on you, that reflection from the mirror? So he says, Kohut writes that the sine qua non for healthy human development is positive mirroring. Positive mirroring happens when another human being takes delight in our accomplishments and empathizes with our pain. In the process of our self-image is mirrored back to us. In the process, our self-image is mirrored back to us. In short, when we experience that we are the apple of someone's eyes, we feel valued, loved, and significant. We all need positive mirroring throughout life. But for a small child whose self-image is being formed, positive mirroring is crucial for healthy psychological growth. Without it, the child's self-esteem becomes fragile and she is vulnerable to self-doubt. In short, a child feels insecure because they questions whether or not she is loved. Because she questions whether or not she is loved. A child feels insecure because she questions whether or not she is loved. The primary mirror for a child is her mother. Beautiful. So when we look at children and identity formation, we can take that back to how the memory is formed. How is the memory formed? And what does that mean to the child? What does that mean to the process of development, the process of neurological, the process of cognitive assessment of actions, of values, of decisions, of choices? I would like to look at this from the spiritual point of view, which is faith, from a psychological point of view, which is the mind, and from an ethical or moral point of view, which has to do with the consequences of actions and their implications. First of all, I want to share a story of what happened just this past week. I called my sister and my niece was there. So this call was made from my car. I was inside the car when I made the call, and it was a video call. So this child, this niece of mine of 4 years, saw me in the car and began to shout, "Get out of my mom's car! Get out of my mom's car!" I said, "That is not your mom's car." And she said, "You are in my mom's car. You are in my mom's car." She's looking at me from the video at her end and shouting at me to get out of her mom's car. And the mom said, "No, that is not my car. My car is outside." And she kept shouting, and the mom had to quieten her and make her to calm down. This is the memory of a child. Memory development starts from infancy and continues through adulthood. And memory development can be influenced by the various factors: parental factors, environmental factors, biological factors, and even peer group related factors, which also have to do with the environment. So when a child is making assessment of actions, when a child is making assessment of choices and decisions, what does that child understand at that point? In the sense that if you go to the brain begins to assess things, but the rationalization of actions for the child is very much limited and is perceptual, in the sense that it is what the child sees that the child takes, and that is how it comes across for the child. So the ability of the brain to encode signals, to store and retain those signals, and then as well as to retrieve them and use them in a way that he or she can assess the moral implications, is highly dependent on the parents. Number one, parents are seen by the child as ideal. Your parents are ideal, and this is what this man is trying to emphasize here in assessing the actions and the things that happened to Saint Therese as a child. So this relates to what Kohut is saying here. Kohut is a psychologist, and he establishes that the sine qua non for healthy human development is positive mirroring. So when the child is before the mom or the dad, the child sees the mom as the mirror, and what the child receives from the mom or the dad becomes the yardstick for interpretation of actions. So the child is vulnerable at that point and takes delight in seeing and hearing from the mom, who becomes the source of reflection for him or her. So the child sees the mom as ideal, as the teacher. The child sees the mom as a parental, as an authority, or the dad. The parent is an authority for the child. And why is that so? Because the child idealizes the mom. There is an idealization of the mom's image, of the dad's image, as reputable and being even spotless. That's the way we saw our parents. Think about it. Just take your mind back to your little 4 years, 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, okay? 1 year back, even growing up into puberty. Your parents were saints, like very spotless. They have answers to every question. They have solutions to every problem. And if you ask them questions and they fail to present the answers, sometimes we felt disappointed because our expectation, our estimation was that our parents should know everything. So they have around them that infallibility of knowledge. They know everything, so they should give us answers. So morally speaking, parents are that authority which we rely upon. In ethics teaches us about the various stages of the development of conscience. Conscience develops at various points in our lives. And for the child, at the infancy level, the childhood level, there is what is called the most conscience versus the ought conscience. Ought is O-U-G-H-T. The most conscience is at that level when conscience relies on moral authorities to make decisions about life. Your parents, your teachers, your pastors, your coach on the pitch, these are moral agents for the child. So at that most conscience level, Think about it. It's your parents who teach you, hey, come on, these are table etiquettes. This is how you can eat. This is how you can drink water. This is how you hold your fork. This is how you hold your knife. This is how you hold your spoon. This is how you put food in your mouth. This is when you go to bed at night. This is why you have to go to bed at this point. And that is to wake up at the appropriate time. This is how to take your shower. This is how to wear your clothes. Wear them properly. Wear your dresses. Wear your pants. This is how you sit when you are in public. You have to close up against the view of others. These are moral authorities. You don't drop trash at the wrong places. You have to put them in trash can. When you go to shop, you don't see everything you want and you want to pick them, cookies, candies on the shelf. No, there are decisions that you have to make. So you rely on your moral authorities to make such decisions, right? So the moral authorities help you to develop your consciences in a positive, healthy way. And the conscience can migrate into the ought level, which means you ought to do this based on what you have learnt. That is how consciences develop. In religion, faith teaches us also about the innocence of the child growing up. In the Gospels, Jesus used examples of children to teach us about innocence, about the child not knowing bad and evil. And he said, unless you become like little children, you would not enter the kingdom of heaven. So childhood is innocence, infancy is innocence, uncorrupt and incorrupt, or rather, incorrupt, right? So the child becomes that model or standard of innocence in relation to action, in relation to the mind's purity and the soul's gentleness in relationships. The book of Proverbs in chapter 22, verse 6 says, train the child in the way he should go, and when he grows old, he would never depart from it. This gives responsibilities to parents and parenting in relation to upbringing of children. And Jesus also talks about not scandalizing the little ones, which means the adults have things that could be scandalous to the children. And they are encouraged to help children to grow and to become good, healthy, reasonable, responsible people in the society. So, when we talk about parenting, we have a role in today's society to help these children grow. This book also makes reference to Alfred Adler. Alfred Adler is a psychologist who kind of focuses on family and stages of development in the family. The Adlerian theory helps us to understand that a person's earliest memories are windows into understanding the person's characterological dispositions and interpretations about life. So Adler said that memories can never run counter to the style of life. Your memory can never run counter to your style of life. And he says this: the first memory will show the child's fundamental view of life. The first memory, the first contacts, the first understanding, the first relationships will ever show the fundamental view of life. And this is what this man tried to explain here in interpreting and assessing the life of Saint Therese. Saint Therese's early memory of her trip to a place called Le Mans at the time revealed so much about her self-image. And during that time, Saint Therese felt overwhelmed to the point of tears because she felt that no one could understand her grief in this book. So Therese's self-image at that point became a belief that her grief is so deep in her that she cannot be understood by mortal beings. So she gradually and unconsciously began to fashion both her strategies towards life for security and for basis for her significance towards self-protection. So she began to protect herself. This was ingrained from those early memories about safety, about security, about exposure to danger for her. This is how life is. It begins from infancy and childhood memories. So sometimes it's a little confusing when you hear people argue about the child's right to make decisions about gender, being a boy or a girl. Come on, how does that make sense? A child of 4, 5, 6, 7, even 8 to make decisions about whether she or he wants to be a boy or be a girl, that doesn't even connect. It is because they hear what we say, because we are their ideal authorities, moral authorities, teachers, reputable people. So they go by what we tell them. So we can understand a little bit as young parents, especially. Young parents, I want you to appreciate the profundity of the task that God has given to you. The greatness of this job, I know is huge, it's enormous, but it's a task that God has placed in your hands, especially in view of the future. What we do with these kids at those early stages when their memories are still wandering and trying to make sense and make meaning out of what looks complicated can be simplified by healthy, rightful, proper, positive parenting. So parents, you have powers, you have authorities. Don't give up those authorities because of what society is trying to infest on you. Don't lose those authorities because of what the social convention is presenting. Remember, that authority is given to you by God. And God said, the scripture says about this, that children are a blessing from the Lord, a reward from God himself. See your children as blessings. Help them to grow positively and make the best out of them. And God is there for you, okay? God bless you. Thank you.